This is Pastor Jeff Snyder of First Calvary Baptist Church of North Andover, Massachusetts. I just wanted to drop by for a few minutes and talk with you. Had an interesting conversation with somebody the other day, and it gave me flashbacks to my childhood and to old Scooby-Doo episodes in which the villain would grumble about the darn meddling kids who had foiled their plans. And the conversation was related to, well, video games and concerns that a character in a video game was a bit suspicious, perhaps less than wholesome, may have had values that aren't particularly traditional. And this was the character of Link, who is the main character in the Zelda franchise, and was being considered as one of those darn meddling kids who was trying to influence gamers in the world today, particularly gamers who are children. And this was tied with a kids these days bias. And it sent me digging. I got curious about this, and I wondered if there was any truth to the charges. And how do we view this through the lens of faith? So I went looking. And I was reminded of Luke chapter 6, verse 42, where Jesus warns, "How can you say to your brother, 'Brother, let me take the speck out of your eye,' when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye?" Let's take a look at video games first and see if we can find out what's going on there. From personal experience, I've found that those who are the angriest with video games are those who are least likely ever to have played a video game on any of the platforms that have ever existed. There's an estimated 3 billion gamers worldwide and growing, which is roughly 40% of the world's population. And how you see those video games may well depend on how you view the world. Whether you played them at first may depend on whether or not they were out when you were a child. If you're older, let's say 65 and above, it's very unlikely that they were, so you may never have developed a habit. So, anyway, your worldview, however, may also play very heavily on how you see video games. I want you to imagine a mountain looming in front of you. Just envision a mountain. How do you see that mountain? Is it a source of adventure for you? Is it a place of discovery? Are you curious about what the view from the top would be? What kind of mountains are on the other side of this one? Is there a whole range of them back there? Are you curious about what animals you might find up there on the mountain? Is it possible that there's a bird that you can add to your life list that you've never had on it before? Do you see the mountain as a place of wonder and excitement and surprise? If so, you probably view the world with a positive bias. And video games are going to work for you. Now, if you look at that mountain and you see it as a source of threat, if it's a fearful and dangerous place for you, if you feel your life will be at risk by going up that mountain, and any animals that you would meet may want to eat you for lunch, and if surprises are not your thing because you're afraid that they'll lead to risk and perhaps death, if it's a place of dread and threat and deadly surprise for you, then you most likely view the world with a more negative bias, and video games are not going to be your thing. Now, we need both the positive and the negative bias in the world today. It's important to have both because the positive bias helps us to move forward in the world, and the negative bias puts on the brakes, keeps us from moving forward too fast or taking a leap that might be a leap too far. So both are needed. They counterbalance each other. But they certainly affect the way you're going to feel about video gaming. And if we're seeing a new situation like the mountain as a threat. And if that is becoming a burden in our lives because we're starting to see the whole world as a potential threat, we need to remember God speaking to us through Isaiah in chapter 41, verse 10, where God says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am, do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." For we find assurance there, and that helps to quell our fears some, for the sake of ourselves and for the sake of others. And we can try to see the world that way as a somewhat less threatening place, and perhaps every surprise isn't necessarily a threat to our lives. And that's a healthy thing, a healthy exercise for us to have. Now, if we're critiquing something, anything, that we have never experienced, well, we probably need to do what Jesus said and remove the log from our own eye. And in this case, we may need to spend some time asking ourselves what our negative response to, in this case, video games, says about the way we view the world before we're questioning the choices of others. Those provoked by the character of Link, who doesn't seem to follow traditional male gender roles, well, may need to take a little closer look at what's going on here. In the 1980s, when the character was first programmed, when the franchise was just getting started, they decided that Link would never speak. In recent years, they have made this character increasingly androgynous. Why? Why are both those things true? Well, basically, it has nothing to do with culture wars or a person's traditional values or lack thereof, and it has everything to do with appealing to a wider audience, to enticing more people into becoming gamers and buying the games of that franchise. It's about increasing the number of video game players worldwide, men and women alike. And it's the same playbook. There's nothing new in video game programmers doing this. This is an old idea. It goes back to written books centuries and centuries ago. If you want your reader to identify more with the main character of a book, you describe that character less. You leave their physical attributes very vague. Well, why do you do that? You do that so that your reader can put themselves in the main character's place, and that way you and your publisher will profit because you'll sell more books. More people will read your story. And that's what that's all about. Link's character is carefully crafted to allow as many gamers as possible to see themselves as the main character, as Link. And to claim that we have concern over the children's safety in this regard, well, that's kind of stretching things a bit, because only 21% of all video gamers are actually kids. 38%, the largest bunch, are between 18 and 34. 26% between 36 and 54. 9% between 55 and 65, and 6% are over the age of 65. You can see as video game systems are introduced, you get more and more players in the ages where it's the most common. And so for 65 and above, there are virtually none because those systems weren't introduced when they were kids. For that 21% who are below the age of 18, sure, parents and guardians, they get to act as filters. They get to uphold their family and their faith values and make sure that their children only get to play the games that they think are safe for them. And you get to talk with other parents and guardians, all your kids' friends, and make sure that you're all on the same page. Or at least that those parents know, those guardians know, that your child should not be playing certain kinds of games. And that if they're available in that house, you would ask them not to have those games played in front of your child. That's up to you. And of course, these games are rated. The ones that are made professionally are all rated from G to M, with M being mature and not being sold to anyone under the age of 18. But like any other form of entertainment, these games range from absolute classics, professionally made and wonderful, down to pure trash. And adult supervision is truly needed. And I would suggest that we all need to be playing our games with those games that our kids want to play, or grandkids want to play, in my case, with them. That we take the time to play with them. That way we become familiar with what they're playing, and we become humbled by how much faster our children's reflexes are than ours. How much more quickly they can read the screen than we can and understand the situation, and how lightning fast they are at problem solving in ways we can no longer hope to be. We come to the realization that our children have formidable talents. And they get to learn from us as well when we play with them. Children mostly expect to get the game right the very first time they open it up and try it. Whereas adults, we've learned that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to mess up, and possibly quite a lot, before we succeed. And we can teach the value of patience to our children, showing them that, no, you don't have to win the very first time. And you can learn from every time you fail. And this will teach them the value of patience, and that will serve them so well in the rest of their lives. They will thank you for that gift. And as I said, that video gaming complaint was linked with the general lament about kids these days and the marked decline of the modern child. And I've always balked about stereotypes like that. They always rub me the wrong way. They fly in the face of Luke chapter 6, verse 37. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. I found research. Scientific research has been done on what they call now, I love this, the kids these days effect. And it seems that older folks have been complaining about the decline of kids these days since at least 624 BC. Now, if kids these days have truly been in decline since 624 BC, if that was a true situation, well, frankly, we would no longer have a civilization. We'd no longer be able to tie our shoes. So, what's actually going on here? It turns out that people have a particular penchant to view children in negative ways. Adults in America who prefer to have things an orderly way and simple will find kids these days disrespect their elders. Those who consider themselves highly intelligent will think that they and their peers from back in the day were far more intelligent than any kids these days. And if a person is a reading enthusiast, they will have the same bias. They'll think they and their friends back in their day read a whole lot more than kids these days. The kids these days effect rolls down across the centuries and across all the cultures worldwide. And it has never been accurate, ever. So what's going on? Well, they've discovered it's based on an illusion of our own superiority, combined with the rosy view of our own childhood that is edited with selective memory that is used to prove our superiority. That's a lot of mental gymnastics to go through. Kids growing up will make those same generalization about their kids and their kids' kids. Look at the irony of that. Down through the generations, everybody's certain that the next generation, they're just kids these days, those darn meddling kids. And when we're feeling grumpy, when we're feeling like Scooby-Doo villains, surrounded by those darn meddling kids, we need to sit back and take a breath. We need to think about what this says about us and our worldview, rather than what it says about kids these days. Perhaps we need an attitude adjustment. Perhaps we need to talk to the younger generations and discover what they truly know. As 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 reads, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Perhaps it's time to put our fear and our bias aside, to stop repeating tired old complaints from 624 BC and instead practice love and self-control, and in that way gain some real power by working across the generations for the actual betterment, the real betterment of everyone. We might even discover that some of the games that are out there may resonate with us. I know of at least one series, one very well-made series, where you, as the main character, benefit by playing the game as peacefully as you possibly can. It improves your situation throughout the game, and it improves how others will treat you as you play. And that's a pretty good, powerful lesson to be handed down through playing a game. So let us reflect on God's patience from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. "The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, and that all should reach repentance." May none of our words, harsh and ill-conceived, more reflective of our own bias than we're willing to admit, may none of those ever drive anyone away from God and God's love. Well, friends, I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you have, like this and share it with your friends. Let's send the good news out a little farther. And let's work at removing kids these days from our particular bias. I wish you all the best. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Go with God. God bless you all. And we'll talk again soon. So long for now.